All right, and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Cards, a Redbird podcast where we talk about all of the relevant payment news you want to hear about, kind of the things that we want to talk about. It's a really good time. So this will be a little bit of a special episode today because we have all just returned back from MAG. So unfortunately, our European colleagues were not invited. And you just have Team US here on the call today. So, a couple of interesting things have really happened in the last few weeks. There has been a lot of news, some finalized, some just really recently breaking. And it kind of plays into where we were positioned at MAG, because we were in a very, I would say, trafficked area because Worldpay has officially announced that they are spinning off from FIS. I think we all kind of knew that was coming, that it had been, floating around in the ether that was likely going to happen. But I think the big kind of shocker for everybody right before we all went to MAG was Capital One announcing their acquisition of Discover, which is really just kind of wild because, a issuing bank owning a card network, kind of a crazy concept. I feel like at one point that wasn't allowed. So it'd be really interesting to see how that kind of changes the competitive landscape of the market. I've seen a couple of discussions online where, people were talking about credit card competition and fee competition, and I read those and I think it's kind of interesting, but I think they kind of miss the point, which is, there is a competition aspect from an issuing side, and capturing the market from an issuing side, which I definitely think Capital One will bolster Discover's market share from an issuing side. But then I think when we really talk about like competition and fees, really we're talking about interchange, right? And is Discover going to be inclined to lower their interchange fees? I don't necessarily think so, because if you think about how rewards are provided through these credit card programs, right? It's based off of the interchange that gets collected. The issuing bank has to earn revenue on those accounts to be able to provide those benefits. Now, if they continue to keep their interchange rates the same, I think that could be really interesting, because then that might show and create some competition in the fact that you can still provide really lucrative benefits and rewards to your customers without having to have these sky high interchange rates. But I mean, Chelsea, Jasmine, we look at interchange rates all the time, I would say. And it's not like there's these massive 10 basis point, 20 basis point deltas on interchange rates between similarly issued products. So I don't really think from like a quote unquote rate competition standpoint that really factors into the whole conversation. What do you guys?
And I think also, I think Discover, having always been the smallest, I'd read too that some of the issuers, tended to stay away from them just for profitability reasons. And also think of your clients and the acceptance. Discover is taken, many, many places, but it's also very limited when you look at, the globe compared to Visa, MasterCard.
Well, and that's because Discover has that diners club, right, internationally. And so it all kind of falls under the Discover umbrella, but usually when you're international, it fades from Discover to diners club.
Yes.
Which I think it's just an interesting brand
I always
recognition
forget about
problem.
Diners Club too. It's a funny one.
That's because you don't work as internationally as some of us do.
True. My dad had a Diners. I always remember that card.
Yeah, and I mean it's like a different logo too, so it is
Mhm.
it does kind of create some brand complexity. But I think you bring up a really interesting point from an issuer perspective, right? Like, why would I issue the baby when I can issue a Visa or
Yeah.
MasterCard and get a lot more penetration from that aspect? I think also if you're old school, right? Remember when Discover didn't issue through banks? And so they were more akin to, let's say, an American Express model, that kind of direct model. And I think they really did get this reputation that they were, if not equally expensive to American Express, more expensive to American Express.
I think they're
They were viewed as more of it.
More expensive? Interesting.
I don't think you don't see too many. I mean, you do see it, but when you look at the acceptance, there's more American Express and Discover, of course, on that. And I guess I'm looking at it that way. But I'm also curious to see the word between Capital One, Discover, and debit. Like,
Yeah.
I want to see that because Discover really doesn't do debit at all. So it's like now you're going into the more of a banking world. How will that debit look? Will there be more issued Discover cards than Visa on Capital One? Because Capital One does more so MasterCard. Are you going to implement Discover in that? So I'm curious to see what that looks like.
That's such a good point, right? Like, Discover debit barely around, right? And it is because they just have a smaller issuing network. And if you think about who is Discover partnered with from like a PIN network perspective, it's Pulse. And so I think that could be very big from a Pulse perspective, especially when you think about routing competition. You think about the change in July 2023, where the Fed clarified, hey, these Durbin rules, we didn't mean that they only took place in card present. We meant that they took place everywhere. So routing competition has to be in both the card present and card not present environment. I think it really opens up a big opportunity for Pulse as their PIN network to really kind of open things up and be a much bigger player. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was definitely part of their strategy. I mean, we, of course, don't know, but was the real target, in this getting into as the pinless continues to grow and having that ownership of Pulse. Pulse was right across from us also at Meg. So
yeah, there's the tie-in, right?
Booth than we've ever seen for Pulse because they've actually always been near us at Meg, and they definitely had a lot of visitors. So
yeah, there you go. There's the tie. We were sandwiched right in between the Worldpay booth and the Discover Pulse booth, and I feel like a lot of the traffic coming by our booth, which thank you to those two companies for creating a very trafficked environment for us to linger around and talk to people waiting to talk to Discover and WorldPay. It made for a very highly trafficked area because everyone was coming by to talk to Discover about this acquisition, and everyone was coming to talk to WorldPay to understand, like, well, what does it mean now that you're no longer part of FIS? I am in the camp that WorldPay will be better without FIS. I think they had a tendency to kind of inhibit WorldPay's strengths a little bit, but maybe that's just me speculating. Yeah, and like speaking of acquisitions, there's another really big one that just came out, like I think the day before we are recording this, right? Which is, seems like Fiserv and Amadeus are in a bid to acquire Shift4, And I'm really fascinated about this, right? Because Shift4 had been increasingly growing in the kind of T&E space, online gambling. They were really filling a void in the acquiring market for those T&E merchants to have a new place to go. Because T&E, notoriously challenging market from an acquiring perspective. You got to have partners who understand the industry and understand how your financials work. And so you have Fiserv, who is kind of like the OG T&E acquirer. But then you have Amadeus. And Amadeus does like all the software behind the scenes for a lot of like hotel bookings, cruise line bookings, airline bookings. And so you can see, and they're huge too, right? Spanish company Amadeus. And so you can see why they would want Shift4, because that's like a vertical stacked product now. And I would wonder if they would if they did acquire Shift4, would they lock that down? Would they say you have to use Shift4 if you're an Amadeus customer? We'll see. I mean, apparently the two are, speculated to be in a bidding war. Yeah, so much to watch on that. So should we fully get into our MAGnified experience?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
So for those that don't know, MAG is a conference that is really catered around the payments industry. There is a wide number of payments vendors that you see coming into MAG. So you have your advisory companies, you have the networks, acquirers, all sorts of ISVs. It's been really popular we see a lot of buy now, pay later booths showing up. And of course, like anti-fraud solution providers. So it's really where you want to go if you are in the payment space, if you're a merchant looking to get some education and really see what's out there. I really like the conference. I think it's really valuable for merchants. And I think one of the things that makes MAG super valuable as compared to maybe some other conferences is they have that merchants only day where they kick us all out, right? Because we're all exhibitors. They say, not you people. And then the merchants get a day to themselves, which I think is really great. I think it's good to know
They
that
have those breakout sessions.
Right.
Yeah, but we
For the
can go to those
merchants that
breakout sessions.
True, but I think on the third day, they do have separate breakout sessions. And I know there's a lot of participation, and a lot of those merchants really enjoy that kind of, conversing with similar organizations, comparing
Notes.
Yeah.
About how much they don't like everybody.
Yeah, because they do have like a little merchant. I don't know if you saw, but those double doors right going to the escalators, those were where the merchants had their little breakout or mini sessions in those little rooms.
Yeah, I mean, I
Right.
think it's in general a good conference environment. I think I go to a lot of conferences, and I think what I like about MAG is if you are a merchant attending MAG, it's less pressure for you. Because a lot of us exhibitors and coming to MAG, right, we work with each other. We know each other. We exist in the same ecosystem. And so you have a lot of vendors who are interested talking to other vendors. And I think that takes a lot of pressure off of being a merchant and attending MAG. You don't have to. And they do a color coding system. If you're an exhibitor or a vendor, you're orange. If you're a merchant, you're blue. And you don't have to do this like name tag lanyard guarding of like, oh no, I'm a merchant. There's a whole bunch of sharks in this ocean. Everyone's going to come after me. Like, I just don't see
it's not
much
quite
in
as
ag.
it's not quite as salesy. It's more trying to stay, up to date and I think on the cutting edge of what's coming out and what's relevant in the marketplace.
Speaking of
they're
sales,
conversational as well. So I don't think there's no bias to it. So I actually like the conference overall.
yeah.
It is very good for first timers. Very, very good. I think everyone takes something away from whether you're just meeting someone, understanding, because there was Chelsea, what were they? Pay test lab?
Yes.
The big
I actually
robot
wrote that as something to talk about on here. Very interesting.
I don't know how I feel
So
about robots.
they had robots. Well, they were actual like robots,
Yeah.
like a person. They were robotic testing for, card testing. And so it was this whole machine where I wasn't necessarily as in tune would be on the purchase of it. I could see that being a great model. I don't think many corporations would buy it, but if there was a rental of that, taking that testing for, of course it eliminates one manual person doing testing for a week or whatever and condenses it significantly. But of course they're trying to sell to providers, but it could also be an interesting model where, merchants could just rent it to handle it.
Right, because I don't see, me as a merchant buying that machine, and then what if I don't need it anymore after I implement what needs to be implemented and testing after it's done? It's just sitting there collecting dust, and the amount I spent on it, I don't think it's going to be continued beneficial unless I upgrade a terminal or anything like that. And that could be years. People keep their terminals and their POS systems for years. So I would think a rental process would be good and not a complete buyout.
Or maybe someone who's like a very like active in acquisition mode, buying a lot of new companies and boarding a lot of new companies into their ecosystem could be an interesting utilization. But yeah, I agree. Like some of that, and again, that speaks to like the diversity of MAG, right? Some people are there literally to sell to other exhibitors. So
Yes.
I think that just speaks to the diversity. But I wanted to talk about sales, even though this is a non-sales related podcast. The giveaways were fierce. There was a lot of good giveaways, I feel, at this conference, and people hit those giveaways hard the first day.
Oh, yes. I wanted the virtual reality game. I was like, how do I win this? And they were like, oh, you have to do the test. I'm sorry, the game. And I was like, oh, I didn't do it.
You also have an orange lanyard, so we won't let you participate.
Right. You have the orange lanyard. Right.
I mean, I don't think it's any secret that I am a sucker for other companies' logoed attire, and I really wanted this ACI t-shirt. I did eventually get one, but I had walked by the ACI booth. ACI, big gateway company, a lot of really cool solutions that they provide, but they had this shirt that said "Be fast" or "Be last," and I'm a runner, right? So I was like, oh, that's like, I could wear this because it reminds me of running. And so they had like a whole bunch of different colors of shirts, and I was like, I'll come by the end of the day. I'm sure there'll still be a few shirts, because sometimes people don't give out the shirts right away. I went by like maybe at 3 p.m. and they only had extra large shirts left. ACI, get more shirts.
Yes.
ACI,
But-
send Dan a shirt so he can wear it.
Please. But Pays had
I
really
think a
good
couple-
giveaways. Order had that
Yes.
cool embroidery machine.
Oh yes,
For the bandanas, right?
Yep, for the bandanas.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah,
We're starting to see more. I mean, if for anyone that's ever been to AFP, my first time going to AFP, I was in shock at the size of that conference. And Meg is very light compared to AFP, but we are starting to see more of these participants really coming with some great ideas. You know, it's fun.
And listen, we are no strangers to giveaways. We like to pride ourselves on our giveaways. And so
We do.
for our giveaway this year, right, we were doing, we gave out these little Lego kits. Full disclosure, they were from Temu. Legos are expensive. And our whole thing was like, okay, you have this defined number of blocks. Like, what can you build with this defined number of blocks? And, you know, our link, our kind of LinkedIn here was, you know, we're very into payment architecture, and, you know, part of our ethos is like, well, what do you do with what you have? And so we handed out these blocks, and, you know, some lovely team members actually sorted them by color. Thanks, internal team. The pink went fast. I think that was the first sets to run out. Was people really liked the pink ones, like the light pink and purple ones.
Yeah.
But it was really super interesting to see what people made with those, because you did have to bring it back to our booth so that, you know, the three of us could do some very official judging. And to see what people made was so interesting and inventive, and I'm really quite surprised at what people made.
yes, they were very, very creative. See, like here we have the glasses. And at first I didn't know what these were until you had to really look, and I was like, "Oh, these are glasses." So kudos to him.
I feel bad because I moved those glasses from one side of the table to the other, and I think I broke them like 5 times and had to rebuild them. And I was terrified every time I rebuilt them that the gentleman was going to come back and be like, "This isn't how I built this originally."
And those actually fit on his
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he put them on.
them custom. Yes. We had someone enter in #Meg.
Genius.
We have one that says pay, right? Was it pay?
Yes, we had a pay. That was very. I liked
Yeah.
that one. And
Well,
signifies Pay Magnified. We were there for payments.
We
We'll
even
get in.
had a cacti, right?
yeah, there was like a flower. Someone made a tree. We, of course, had our Red
Mhm.
Bridge arch. And people were asking us all sorts of fun, like, they're like, okay, well, like, what are the rules? Like, can I only use one kit? If there's 2 of us from the same company, can we combine our kits to make something? And my kind of response was like, yeah, if you want to combine kits, like, sure. Like, we want to see.
This was their homework. I mean, they were working hard
Yeah.
on this that first night.
And I'm very, very happy to do this. Like it was literally like they were back in kid mode when.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So many people came up and were like, I played with Lego so much as a kid. This was like a really exciting thing for me to do. Or like I played with Legos a lot as a kid, and now my kids are super into Legos, and we like sit and hang out and build Legos together. Which, by the way, we're American and we totally say Legos. We add the S. Do you know Europeans don't add the S?
Oh, so it's Lego?
They say, let's play Lego.
They just say, let's play Lego. And I don't
That
know
just
if I
let
can
me
get behind that.
let go of my ego.
Well, isn't Lego Danish for like let's play?
I'm pretty sure, yes.
The entire country of Denmark is going to come into the comments and be like, that's not what it means.
The architecture series are very cool. We those were our giveaways for 2 for the winners of the Lego competition, and then we also drew a name for anyone who registered for our podcast actually at our booth as well.
Yeah, should we bring up the winners? Let's look at the winners.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's talk about why first place won first place. And
this is Marco, the Rentis Center.
So, if you look at what he did, is he kind of bent the rules a little bit, which there were no rules, so I shouldn't say that he bent the rules. Okay, Marco wanted to make an A, but of course, these are right angle blocks. You can't make a perfect A. He severed the ends of some of the blocks so that they would come back together and make an A. And then he glued a piece in the middle. And I just thought that was genius, right? That I was like, this is exactly the ethos of what we were going for, right? What's the big brain solution? How do you work with what you have and make it inventive, reposition it, think about using something in a different way? And so I think when he brought that back, we were like, I think this guy's the winner.
Yes, very inventive. Second place was Kristen with Merits, and same thing, she kind of went for that word build. Hers was cool. #Mag with all the orange, yellow.
Great use of
blocks.
Color. Great use of color.
Also, way to make those letters, because I'm not probably quite as skilled in the Lego building right now.
I know. Okay, and I feel like this is where you figure out who was maybe an OCD child. I know when I played with Legos, I was all about making sure the colors were the same. I couldn't have if I was building something with walls, all had to be the same color or the same pattern. I couldn't have just a random yellow block in there just because it was the one block that I had and that I needed. I'd be like, well,
it's meant to be, yes, a green fence.
Yeah, looks like I can't build this anymore. So definitely really interesting that people even took consideration of how the colors were lining up. And I think, okay, so third place, right? Still an amazing, construction. And again, I'm sorry, I broke it 5 times. So scared. And by the way, the people at the booth were watching me move it and break it so intently that they were just watching my freak out.
They were finding it humorous.
They did. I did think they found it quite comical about how much I was stressing out about how much I was breaking some of them and trying to refix them. But he has the colors so uniformly spread and symmetrical that I was like, at first glance, you're like, oh, okay, they're just glasses. And then you look to see that he actually made them so symmetrical and perfectly balanced the colors. I'm like, how'd he do that?
Guys, I just thought of something. There is an app. I don't know if it's an app. And you lay your Legos.
Are you implying that someone cheated?
Yes.
Well, it really wouldn't be cheating because we didn't have any rules. But it's very cool. So you lay down the Legos, right? And it takes a photo and recognizes the number of bumps. I'm sure there's a more term for that size. And it shows you what you can actually create with that, which I think is brilliant because I have so many random Legos around my house now.
Yeah, and I think it also gives you a layout. So if you kind of draw what you're wanting, it kind of guides you on how to place the Legos correctly Yeah, so it's a little.
Maybe he used that for the glasses.
Spoiler
Yeah.
alert, that's how we made our Redbridge arch.
Let's see.
Oh, that's
So
right.
did we see?
That's how we knew how deep to go.
Look, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that was the giveaways. So who did we find interesting? Who were some people that we spoke to that really tickled our fancy? There were some people who were a little bit off the beaten path, but I definitely think were so fascinating to talk to, and those were the people from Pays. Now, we had known about Pays entering the ether kind of over the summer. We work with clients who have a lot of these tight banking relationships, and for those that don't know, Pays is a digital wallet that is brought to the market by Early Warning, the same people behind Zelle. So it's the bank consortium, and it's a new digital wallet to like really compete with, like, let's say Apple Pay, Google Pay, PayPal. And like, I must say, they dispelled so many like preconceived notions that I had about this, because when we had been learning about it kind of over the summer, I don't think that they really had as much information out about it. So they're going to comment and be like, actually, we did. But like, I know that it had been introduced to one of my clients, and like and no one from like Pays was there representing the product. It was just like through a bank. And like one of our big questions was like, okay, but people are super concerned these days. So how are customers going to react to the fact that their credit and debit cards are added into a digital wallet that they never added themselves? Because that's how we're used to doing it, right? Like if you want to use Apple Pay or Google Pay or PayPal, like you add the payment method to the wallet. And what I thought was really interesting is that this is one directional, right? Like you don't add a payment method in, your bank adds it in for you. And that's the only way a payment method can get added into the wallet. And just like one kind of blew my mind a little bit, because that's so different from how other digital wallets work. But then I started thinking about it and I'm like, okay, that actually does make it more trustworthy, right? Like, if only the bank can add your payment methods into the wallet, that gives me kind of a little bit more security.
Yeah, I think you will have a little, I don't know if you would call it shock, but for the clients who, let's say they're going through the checkout process, but this is also why we found it so fascinating. They're moving through the checkout process. There's not this new wallet setup per se. It's simply recognized by their email associated with said bank, right? And then it will, as I take it, it will show those options for in that wallet, which is really cool. However, if I'm logging through, I'm feel like, whoa, how did this know I have a US Bank debit card?
It's the same way with like Zelle, right? Like I think people had the same concerns with Zelle of being like, how does it know?
Yeah, how is it
Now
recognizing?
Zelle, but now like Zelle is like
Just a norm.
wildly, yeah, and it's wildly popular. People use it all the time. I would say maybe it is a generational thing. Like, I'm still paying people via Venmo. But like it does seem that like this could really be a good answer for people who normally wouldn't reach for a digital wallet, being like, oh, this is so streamlined to me now, and I trust this a lot more, so I'm gonna pay with my Pays wallet. watch that space, right? I think we had talked to them quite a bit about like, well, what are you doing from like a marketing standpoint? Because, I think if you look at something like FedNow, like no one knows about FedNow. Sorry,
No.
FedNow. But like, where's the marketing campaign? This isn't trying to get into the hands of consumers, it doesn't seem like. And so like we asked them, we were like, well, what are you planning on doing from a marketing campaign? Because Zelle kind of had a decent marketing campaign, but they definitely are putting money behind the marketing campaign coming out for Pays. So expect to see a lot of Pays commercials popping up on CNN in between probably a pharmaceutical commercial, right? I definitely think we'll see a lot of them on the airwaves here pretty soon.
I'm curious to see what's going to happen with Pays, and how they're not necessarily how they're going to not be competition with the market here with, again, Venmo, Zelle. You use Venmo, I use Zelle. I don't even know my Venmo password anymore.
Drag Venmo. Yeah, I mean, honestly, if I were PayPal, I might be a little concerned. Granted, PayPal has like diehard loyal customers, but that's who I would be watching to see who's impacted by this, right? Does PayPal suffer a little bit from this? Like, will Pays be in our phones, and will we just be able to do things that way? I mean, let's be real. Will Apple not allow like an NFC Pays wallet to be added as an option? So I think there's some interesting conversations about how it plays out in an NFC space. But yeah, we were very, I guess you could say, tickled by Pays. Very interesting offer, very interesting product rolling out, and new, right? Kind of cool to see something new coming out to the market. What else? We did have a really interesting conversation with a lovely lady by the name of Judy Mock. She is from the Covington and Burling law firm. Had a great conversation with her, and just what we think about and everyone thinks about when it comes to negotiating acquiring contracts. I think we're all pretty good at understanding the commercials, but all of the things that are negotiable in acquiring contracts, I mean, and I've been doing this for a long time, and some of the things I knew, but she really kind of blew my mind on all the things that are negotiable within those contracts.
Yeah, she opened up a lot of insight to what you can negotiate that I didn't even think you could negotiate. I think you negotiated with a client that you were talking about recently. What was it?
We do, there's some kind of easy things to think about, right? You think about like, okay, there's a, reserved language in a contract. There's almost always reserved language in a contract. So you think about, okay, like if a reserve is enacted, how much are you allowed to draw from my daily cash receipts? How quickly is it funded? What is the mechanism? And then also, like, most importantly, is if I provide a remedy or if there's a cure, like what is my cure period? And if I cure within that time, we take the reserve off. But if there is anything held in reserve and I remedy the situation, how fast do you give me back my money? Right? That's a very common one. He went into so much detail. And, I think that really speaks to the fact that the acquiring industry is super complex. it's made to be that way. And, I think we get the question a lot of, will you help us look at this contract? And listen, none of us are lawyers. We don't pretend to be lawyers, not even on TV. And, we'll look at commercials. We'll make suggestions on some of those high points. But, if you're somebody who's interested in really reviewing an acquiring contract, and you maybe don't have the in-house legal expertise to do so, I mean, man, it makes sense to maybe talk to one of these specialized law firms.
Yes. Well, and I think the difference too is your in-house legal, they're not negotiating merchant contracts frequently, right? It's kind of every couple of years, or if there's an addition or a change, whereas she's and her team, or someone in that specialty, that's all they're doing. So they're very in tune with what's going on, shifting in the marketplace, where there may be opportunities for changes or modifications, and probably has some great insight into that, since she's dealing with multiple merchants all the time on just payment card contracts and kind of things within that space.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, contracts are evolving. I think some contracts look the same as they've always looked, but with some of the newer acquirers out there that are rising to prominence, they have much different contracts. And we were joking because we were talking about just like responses, right? And she was like, yeah, some of these providers, they put links in their contracts. And so they say, for full terms, follow this link. And she was mentioning about how, like, that's a big no-no, because, you follow a link to a web page. Well, that web page can change. They can change the language on that web page. So if you agree to terms that are explicitly stated outside of a contract, like, that provider can now change whenever they say on that website, and it's very hard to track. Like, what are you going to do? Use the Wayback Machine and be like, well, your website 10 months ago said this, and now you've updated it to that, but we signed the contract 10 months ago under these conditions. So just like little things like that you wouldn't even think about, of being like, that is important. And this is why Mag is so cool. You run into these people, you have those types of conversations. It's so fascinating to have those kind of conversations. Or you're me and you're aggressive and you walk right up into a booth and pick a little bit of a fight.
Oh yeah, you can pick a fight.
I didn't intentionally mean to, but again, I think it landed on a good note. It landed on a very interesting note. So I maybe had some complaints about a specific terminal model, and sorry, Equinox, I still not 100% sold on that model. But we got into this really interesting conversation about how terminal models get created, those little tiny features that you don't think of, like, are your keypads backlit? The spacing between a pin shield and the keys, and where the screen points, or where the card is inserted, or how it's inserted. A lot of conversations go into that from accessibility and mobility standpoint, from a security standpoint. And I just thought that was really fascinating. And I mean, I think you generally know that there's obviously things done from an accessibility and mobility standpoint, but just the minutia that goes into the planning of those devices. But I think where we got really carried away in conversation was just around like the payment applications themselves. And, something I feel can really impact enterprise merchants is, especially if you have a large card present footprint, is those terminals can be a trap. Like, let's be real. They're expensive. You have to deploy a lot of them. They are injected with encryption keys. And you sometimes build your integrations entirely based off of the payment application that lives in that terminal. And one of the conversations that we were like devolving into was, well, what about building your own payment application? What about being in more control over your encryption keys? What about creating a point of sale and payment application that is essentially your own, so that way you don't have to be as locked in to an ecosystem that you may currently find yourself in. And she was so great, the woman there. I believe her name was Megan Norfleet. I mean, she was super knowledgeable, and
any question you had, she was very, very responsive. She challenged you with some of your
I love
your line of thinking. Like, why do you think that? Like she literally wanted all of your feedback, and she always had a response for you. And I think she was very not only resourceful, but she gave a lot of good information and feedback regarding her products.
Yeah, just a really fascinating conversation, and obviously I think those options are available from a lot of other terminal providers, right? Like Pax, Ingenico, Verifone, Equinox. I definitely think that that's the type of kind of like big brain conversation that you should be having if you're an enterprise merchant. Hey, maybe I want more control in this situation. And I would say it's an investment. I don't think that that's something that comes easy. But, if you're thinking about counterparty risk, you're thinking about flexibility, you're thinking about control of an experience, I mean, that just sounds like the way to go. Again, people are going to be like, actually, no, but engage us in the comment section if you disagree. We're there to answer. Anybody else that kind of tickled your guys' fancy?
Let's see. I was very intrigued about Vendicia. Believe it's name is Shane. It's they are in the market, are in the business of helping recover recurring payments.
Yeah, they are specialty provider in like the subscription recurring payment space, and they are a recovery service. So, I know we talked about microtransactions in our first episode, and that's probably why we had such a good conversation with him, because we were like, hey, you should listen to our episode on microtransactions. But right, the recovery of recurring payments is so important, if you run that particular model, because it costs so much money internally to try to recover them. And I thought they positioned themselves well, right? They were like, listen, we want to be the option of last resort.
Right. I think that's what's such a nice feature is they're not coming in to try to add difficulty. They're coming in as you said, that last resort where you would likely lose it anyways. So why not try? They have some, very interesting technology and methods. And without trying, it's kind of like, well, it would be lost. It would be lost anyways. That's
super forthcoming on talking about AI and machine learning, which I personally appreciate. I think he was very open and honest with them being like, look, our AI models are machine learning. It knows how to find them. AI is a bit of a black box, but we do fidelity testing to make sure that it's actually returning real and logical solutions for retries. And I would just caution anybody of jumping too deep into the AI machine learning bandwagon, because again, now I'm going on a complete tangent, but they are black boxes. They're great, but they do lack fidelity. And I think his kind of really interesting comment there was like, this probably won't be a set it and forget it type solution. Like, you should engage with the solution so that it returns value. Jasmine, get your computer under control.
Just put me on blast right now. Sure.
That's what I'm here for. See, I think we're kind of coming up on time. Any last
Well,
people?
did get this feedback. I won't say about people, but all of the people that we did talk to, they did. I really, really appreciate you guys. You guys attended my session, and I got great feedback from it.
How could I forget? I'm such a bad boss. The highlight, right, is our very own Jasmyne Willis presented at MAG to a good-sized crowd. I eyeballed it, and I thought I saw about 100 people in that room.
Close. It was 70.
Yeah.
Oh,
very well attended.
Very well.
Questions?
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially for a Thursday, right? This was the last day that of really like, because Wednesday is the big day, right? Like, this is the packed Wednesday. Thursday, MAG is kind of rolling down around 3 p.m. on a Thursday as it transitions into merchant only. So to get a crowd of 70 people on a Thursday, great. Excellent.
Right.
And I do love the woman who asked a rather like sensitive question, and we spoke with her after the fact where she was like, I feel like they didn't want me to ask that question. And we were like, well, we love that question, so wasn't any insult to us. We'll answer that question all day long. And good questions from the crowd in general. I do know that when it comes to, because this was MAGnified, so this is their mid-year conference, because MAG happens in 2 sessions. There's mid-year, which is a little bit smaller of a crowd, and then there's their annual, which is a little bit bigger. And when you do annual, I think they force you to use Slido for questions. But this was like the raise your hand, ask it.
Well, to that
There
point,
wasn't even a mic.
use Slido. So they did
Wow,
Slido
make me a liar.
and submitted a question to Slido. But so when I just saw one question, I was just like, hey, maybe everyone didn't do Slido, so let me just raise your hand and just ask the question. So I just kind of took it, took it off course a little bit.
I know. I think they were like, gal, you can't be walking in the crowd like that.
I honestly couldn't hear her. So I was like, let me kind of scoot down here and go hear her closely. So that's why I did that, No offense. I do apologize if I
liked it. Get in the crowd. Engage, right? I think that's, I think sometimes if you're like a conference attendee, and I know I am that guy when I attend sessions, I ask very difficult questions, and I know they skip over mine sometimes. So that's why I always ask.
Those pop up on Slido and say, "Okay, I'm going past that one." That's
Well,
just
right.
right up a can of worms.
Like, not that one, please. Because sometimes, right, like you're trying to answer questions and be respectful in a room that's likely multiple different people in there, right? So you probably have some providers, you probably have some merchants. You never know quite where someone is going with their question, and sometimes it's just not the best venue to answer that type of question, or it's just too specific, right? Like it's too specific to a particular situation. So if you are one of our new subscribers, thank you. And you attended Jasmyne's session and you didn't have a chance to ask your question. We haven't seen your email yet, so you should definitely submit a question to us. We'll answer it.
Exactly. And any feedback you guys have for me, I'm going to soak it all in. So I would love to hear back from you guys. And let us know how your experience of MAG was if you attended MAG.
Yeah, comment below. I'll say one final note about MAG before we wrap it up, and this is just me being a total cheeseball. MAG's got great food.
They do.
Yes, they do.
As a vegan with dietary requirements, everything is so well labeled, such good options, and I think Forder was sponsoring the desserts. Okay, if you're a dessert person, that was your conference. Ben and Jerry's each day, big scoops. It's like $8 ice cream they were handing out. Big old slices of cheesecake. If you're also attending the conference for food, go to MAG. You're gonna get
MAG is to go to. Yep,
you're gonna get fed well. Lots of good snacks, always. Drinks available. They are definitely a conference where you are going to get treated well.
There were some fun events, too, in the evening.
Yeah, they definitely do have fun events. Yeah. There's always like a theme.
Yeah, this one I think Forder did. Also, Forder did the rodeo special for when we were in Texas. They made custom cowboy hats. So you got to take your own cowboy hats. They had that one up the rest. It was fun. I heard great feedback on that one.
Spoiler alert, we were celebrating Jasmyne's session, so we didn't necessarily go to all of those. But we ask, and we've been to them in the past, and they're always a good time.
And we supported some great local restaurants.
Exactly.
There you go. Redbridge, we care. All right, guys. I think it's been a great session, and we look forward to engaging with you all in the comments. And next week, we will be on our regularly scheduled topics of going deep into the news and some exciting topic. I'm thinking next week, do we talk about who's a Gen 3 acquirer? Because I feel some type of way about this conversation.
Yes. Yeah. I think we had a brief conversation about that.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Until next month.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.